Arjun Malhotra stood in their Mumbai penthouse kitchen, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips as his wife's words hung in the air like smoke. "It's just a weekend camping trip, Arjun. Samir and I haven't had a chance to catch up properly in years." Lena's voice carried that practiced brightness she used when discussing something she'd already decided. Samir Joshi, the name that appeared too frequently in her phone notifications lately. Her childhood best friend who'd conveniently relocated to Mumbai 6 months ago, just as Lena's pharmaceutical career had taken off at Vertex Solutions. "Camping," Arjun repeated, setting down his mug with deliberate calm. "Since when do you camp? You refused to stay at that beach resort last year because it didn't have a spa." Lena laughed, but it sounded hollow. "People change. I need this, Arjun. Work has been suffocating, and Samir suggested." Arjun's jaw tightened. "Right." The silence that followed felt like glass cracking. Lena busied herself with her phone, thumb scrolling with increasing speed. Arjun watched her, really watched her, noting the shadows under her eyes, the way her shoulders curved inward, like she was protecting something fragile inside her chest. "When do you leave?" he asked quietly. "Friday afternoon. We'll be back Sunday evening." 3 days, 72 hours of imagining his wife in another man's tent, sharing whispered conversations under stars that should have been theirs. That night, Arjun lay beside Lena in their king-sized bed, the space between them feeling vast despite mere inches separating their bodies. He reached for her hand in the darkness, finding her fingers cold. "Lena," he whispered, "if something's wrong, if I've failed you somehow, please just tell me." She turned toward him, and in the dim light filtering through their curtains, he saw her eyes glisten. For a moment he thought she might confess everything, whatever everything actually was. Instead, she kissed him, desperately, urgently, like she was trying to memorize his taste. Her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and Arjun responded despite the ache in his chest. They made love with an intensity that felt both passionate and mournful, her body arching beneath him as she whispered his name like a prayer or an apology. Afterward, she curled against his chest, and he felt her tears wet against his skin. "I love you," she murmured. "Then don't go," he replied. But she said nothing, and in that silence, Arjun felt their marriage begin to fracture. Friday arrived with cruel efficiency. Arjun stood at their apartment window, watching Lena load her Range Rover with camping gear that looked suspiciously new, tags still attached to the sleeping bag, the hiking boots unmarred by a single scuff. "Goodbye kiss?" she asked, approaching him with forced cheerfulness. He kissed her forehead, unable to meet her eyes. "Be safe." As her car disappeared into Mumbai's chaotic traffic, Arjun felt something harden inside him. Not anger, he'd expected anger. Instead, a cold, analytical calm settled over him, the same mental state he adopted when assessing corporate risks at his firm. He spent Saturday in his home office, ostensibly reviewing quarterly reports, but his mind kept wandering. By Sunday morning, he'd made a decision that felt both rational and slightly insane. Arjun accessed Lena's shared credit card account. Nothing unusual. Fuel purchase Friday evening in Lonavala, approximately 2 hours from Mumbai. Then, nothing. No campsite fees, no grocery purchases, no restaurant charges in any rural area. Instead, Sunday afternoon showed a hefty charge at the Oberoi Suites in Pune. His phone buzzed. Lena's text read, "Weather got bad, cutting trip short. Home by 8 p.m. Love you." Arjun stared at the message, then at the credit card statement showing the luxury hotel charge. The pieces didn't fit, not in the way he'd feared. This wasn't the pattern of an affair. Affairs involved discretion, cash payments, burner phones. This was something else entirely. When Lena arrived home that evening, she looked exhausted rather than glowing. Her camping gear remained pristine, but her business laptop bag, which shouldn't have accompanied a camping trip, showed signs of heavy use. "How was it?" Arjun asked neutrally. Refreshing, she lied, not meeting his eyes. I'm going to shower. While water ran in their bathroom, Lena noticed Lena's phone buzzing repeatedly on the kitchen counter. Samir's name flashed across the screen with messages that appeared and disappeared too quickly to read fully, but one phrase caught his eye. HR knows about the retreat. We need to coordinate our story. Monday morning, Arjun arrived at his office at Malhotra and Associates Risk Management to find an unusual email waiting. A request from Vertex Solutions HR Director, Priya Deshmukh, asking for a confidential meeting regarding potential corporate ethics violations involving employee Lena Kapoor. His wife's company was investigating her. That evening, Arjun came home to find Lena curled on their sofa, still in her work clothes, mascara streaked down her cheeks. When she saw him, she didn't speak, just launched herself into his arms, sobbing so hard her entire body shook. He held her, stroking her hair, waiting. Whatever was happening, whatever secret she'd been carrying, it was about to shatter completely. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "I never meant... I was so scared." "Tell me," Arjun said quietly. "Whatever it is, just tell me the truth." The truth arrived in the sterile conference room of Vertex Solutions 2 days later, where Arjun sat beside Lena across from HR Director Priya Deshmukh and Corporate Counsel Vikram Patel. Priya slid a folder across the polished table. "Mrs. Kapoor, these are travel logs, expense records, and building access data from the weekend you claimed to be camping." Lena's hand trembled as she opened the folder. Arjun leaned closer, scanning the documents that told a story far different from the one he'd imagined. Friday evening, both Lena and Samir badged into the Vertex Pharmaceutical Research Facility in Pune, a facility that was supposed to be closed for the weekend. Saturday morning, hotel charges at the Oberoi Suites, 2 executive rooms registered to Vertex Solutions corporate retreat. Saturday afternoon, conference room booking for a private meeting with 3 board members, none of whom had authorized the gathering. There was no camping trip, Priya stated. There was an unauthorized corporate meeting where sensitive proprietary information was discussed. Lena's voice came out broken. "It wasn't my idea." Vikram Patel leaned forward. "Then whose was it?" "Samir's." Lena looked at Arjun, her eyes pleading for understanding. 3 months ago, I discovered Samir had been leaking our formulation data to our competitor, Genesis Pharma. He said it was just consulting work, that everyone did it, that I was naive for thinking it was wrong. Arjun's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. "Why didn't you report him?" "Because he threatened me." Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks. "He said if I exposed him, he'd claim I was complicit. He had emails, taken out of context, that made it look like I'd approved his consulting arrangement. He said he'd destroy my career, my reputation, everything." Priya's expression softened slightly. "So the camping trip. He told me the board members wanted to meet privately about a potential merger with Genesis Pharma. He said I needed to be there to explain the technical aspects of our formulations, that it was my chance to prove my value to the company." Lena's voice cracked. "I was so stupid. I didn't realize he was setting me up to take the fall for his corporate espionage until we were already there." Arjun felt rage burning through his carefully maintained calm. "Samir Joshi used your friendship, your trust, to manipulate you into covering his criminal activity." "I should have told you," Lena whispered, "but I was terrified. If you knew I was being investigated, if you thought I'd compromised everything we'd built—" "Stop." Arjun cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I would never abandon you. Never." Vikram consulted his tablet. "Mrs. Kapoor, we have evidence that you attempted to withdraw from the weekend meeting multiple times. We also have recordings. Yes, the conference room was monitored, showing Mr. Joshi explicitly threatening you and pressuring you to sign documents that would have transferred blame for his actions onto you." Relief flooded Lena's face. "Then you know I wasn't part of the conspiracy." "We know," Priya confirmed. "You're a victim of professional coercion and manipulation. Mr. Joshi, however, is currently being escorted from the building by security and will face both corporate and criminal consequences." That night, back in their penthouse, Lena finally broke completely. Arjun found her in their bedroom, surrounded by printed emails, documentation of Sameer's threats, evidence she'd been collecting in terrified silence for months. "I felt like I was drowning," she sobbed. "Every day pretending everything was fine. Every night lying next to you knowing I was hiding something that could destroy us both." Arjun knelt beside her, gathering the scattered papers. "Why didn't you trust me?" "Because you're perfect." The words burst out of her, raw and anguished. "You're brilliant, ethical, respected. You built your entire career on integrity and risk management. How could I tell you that I'd been so naive, so easily manipulated, that I'd let someone weaponize our friendship against me?" "Lena," Arjun's voice was steady, commanding. "Look at me." She raised her tear-stained face. "I'm not perfect. I'm a man who spent an entire weekend imagining his wife in another man's arms. A man who accessed your credit cards, who suspected you of betrayal, who let fear poison his trust." He brushed tears from her cheeks. "We're both human, both flawed, both capable of making mistakes." "But I should have—" "You survived," he interrupted firmly. "You were targeted by someone who exploited your kindness, your loyalty, your trust. That's not naivety. That's being a decent person in an indecent situation." Lena collapsed against him, and he held her as months of suppressed terror and shame poured out. They stayed like that for hours, Arjun's strong arms wrapped around her trembling form, whispering reassurances until her sobs finally subsided into exhausted breathing. Later, after she'd fallen into restless sleep, Arjun made a phone call. "Malhotra and Associates Risk Management, how may I help you?" "Connect me with our corporate litigation team. I need someone to file a personal lawsuit against Sameer Joshi for intentional infliction of emotional distress, coercion, and defamation." His wife had been victimized professionally. Now, Arjun would ensure there were personal consequences too. He returned to their bedroom to find Lena awake, watching him with something that looked like wonder. "You're fighting for me?" she whispered. "Always," he promised, sliding into bed beside her. "I will always fight for you." She kissed him then, different from that desperate kiss before her fake camping trip. This kiss carried gratitude, relief, and a rekindling of something they'd both feared was lost. Her hands explored his body with renewed familiarity, rediscovering the man she'd been too afraid to confide in. Arjun responded with deliberate tenderness, worshipping every inch of her skin as if remapping territory after a long absence. When they finally came together, it felt like a homecoming, two people finding their way back to each other after wandering too long in separate darkness. Afterward, Lena traced patterns on his chest. "I was so afraid you'd leave me." "Never," Arjun murmured against her hair. "You're my home, Lena. Whatever storms come, we face them together." 3 months later, Arjun stood in the kitchen of their penthouse, watching his wife laugh freely for the first time in what felt like years. Vertex Solutions had not only cleared her of all wrongdoing, but promoted her to Senior Director of Pharmaceutical Development, a position she'd earned through talent, not manipulation. Sameer Joshi faced criminal charges for corporate espionage and civil lawsuits from both Vertex Solutions and the Malhotra family. The childhood friendship had revealed itself as something far more sinister, a calculated, long-term manipulation by someone who'd targeted Lena specifically because of her rising career success. "Penny for your thoughts?" Lena approached, sliding her arms around Arjun's waist from behind. He turned, pulling her close. "Just thinking about how close we came to losing everything." "But we didn't," she kissed his jaw, "because you chose to trust me even when the evidence looked damning. Because you fought for the truth instead of accepting the obvious lie." Arjun tilted her chin up, studying the woman he'd married 6 years ago,
the woman who'd been tested by betrayal and emerged stronger. I learned something important through all this. What's that? That true romance isn't about perfect moments or grand gestures. It's about standing beside someone when they're drowning in darkness and refusing to let go until you both reach the light. Tears glistened in Lena's eyes, but they were different tears now. Tears of gratitude, of relief, of overwhelming love for the man who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and loved her anyway. That night, they made love with a depth of intimacy they'd never achieved before, not despite the trauma they'd endured, but because of it. Every touch carried the weight of battles fought and won together, every whispered word a reaffirmation of vows that had been tested and proven unbreakable. As Arjun held Lena afterward, her head resting against his heartbeat, he realized that marriages aren't destroyed by storms. They're destroyed by the decision to face those storms alone. "I love you," Lena murmured sleepily. "I love you too, and I promise, no more secrets. Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," she agreed, her hand finding his in the darkness. Outside their window, Mumbai's lights glittered like scattered stars, illuminating a future that suddenly felt full of possibility again. They'd walked through fire and emerged not just intact, but transformed, two people who'd learned that the greatest romance isn't found in fairy tales, but in the deliberate, daily choice to protect, trust, and cherish the person you've chosen to build a life with. Their story hadn't been about a camping trip for corporate espionage or even betrayal. It had been about something far more fundamental: the power of unconditional love to illuminate truth, the strength required to be vulnerable, and the courage to fight for what matters most, even when the whole world seems determined to tear it apart. And as they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, both Arjun and Lena understood that this was their new beginning, not a return to innocence, but an evolution into something deeper, truer, and infinitely more precious than what they'd had before.